So welcome to FIT's webinar, Feedback on Concept Note Intake 1. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Christina McIsaac. I am the Director of Innovation for the Fund for Innovation and Transformation. With me today is my colleague Rebecca Chin, who is the Program Officer for Technical and Innovation. Rebecca's going to start things off today, and then we'll hand it over to me a little bit later in the presentation.
Thanks, Christina. So a few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Participants' mics will be muted, but you'll have the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. We'll try to answer what we can during the presentation and the Q&A session at the end. Following the presentation, we'll email you a brief survey to solicit your feedback about the webinar. Thank you for taking the time to fill it out. Your feedback helps us improve. We appreciate your comments. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that FIT is a program of the Inter-Council Network of Provincial and Regional Councils, managed by the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation and funded by Global Affairs Canada. In today's webinar, we'll provide a quick overview of our program, share some stats and observations from our first intake, explain our review process, provide some general feedback and observations about the concept notes we received, and answer a few commonly asked and live questions. What is FIT? The Fund for Innovation and Transformation, or FIT, is designed to support Canadian small and medium-sized organizations testing innovative solutions that advance gender equality and empower women and girls in the Global South. Successful applicants will receive between $150,000 to $250,000 over a 6 to 15-month period to test their solutions in partnership with local organizations. FIT is not a typical development program. Ideas submitted must be innovative and at the proof of concept phase. By innovative, we mean that we are looking for new or improved, locally driven business models, policy practices, approaches, partnerships, technologies, behavioral insights, financing mechanisms, or ways of delivering products and services. You can find more information about innovation on our website. FIT supports the testing of innovative solutions to development challenges. FIT does not support development projects being implemented. Another key goal of FIT is to build capacity and foster collective learning and knowledge sharing among SMOs. What do we mean by knowledge sharing? FIT will provide general resources and tools through its website for the Canadian SMO community, including those who apply and those who are not selected to move forward. We'll provide additional support for SMOs who are selected for funding by facilitating peer exchanges and mentorship. As we learn from SMOs testing innovative solutions, we plan to share that information with the greater SMO community in the form of workshops, storytelling, panels, conferences, and podcasts, for example. So what did we see in Concept Note Intake 1? In our first intake, we received 75 concept notes, 60 in English and 15 in French, from across Canada. We were very happy to see representation from most of the provinces, with the exception of Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories. We hope to see even greater regional representation in future intakes. We were also pleased to see that we received concept notes from different sectors. Not surprisingly, 3/4 of the submissions were from the civil society sector. We also received roughly 10% from post-secondary institutions and 15% from for-profit or social enterprises. Of the submissions we received, it was interesting to note that about 60% proposed testing and innovation in an African country, and about 20% were proposed in each Asia and Latin America. We were also pleased with the breadth of themes represented in the application pool. For the purposes of today's webinar, we've divided the themes into these broad categories. The majority of concept notes were focused on health and economic development, with a strong contingent of education projects. As a reminder, FIT has a 3-step application process. First, SMOs are encouraged to confirm their eligibility for the program. Next, we ask you to submit a 5-page concept note which provides an overview of your idea and how you will test it. Those that show the most promise will then be invited to submit a 15 to 20-page proposal. Our process is designed to save time and resources for SMOs who may not be selected for funding, as well as provide timely feedback. We recognize the time and effort required to develop a full proposal, so we've made the decision to only move forward those with the most promising ideas. Next, we'll speak about how we've designed the concept note review and evaluation process. Our first step was to make sure SMOs completed the online form and submitted the required documents, including, for example, financial statements. Where there were questions or we needed further clarification, we followed up with SMOs to ensure their applications were complete. The concept notes were then reviewed by the FIT team, who have expertise in international development, gender, MEL, innovation, the environment, finance, and grant review. The FIT team reviewed all 75 concept notes, 31 of which were forwarded to the expert review panel for further review and recommendations. The criteria in the concept note guidelines were all taken into consideration as part of this review. The final stage of the review was completed by the expert review panel, which included professionals from various sectors, such as international development, government, and business, with expertise in several areas, including gender, innovation, testing, climate change and the environment, and agriculture, among others. Of the 31 concept notes put forward, 18 were selected by the panel to move on to the proposal stage.
Thanks, Rebecca. So FIT was able to review the concept notes and relay decisions to SMOs within a 7-week time period. And we were very pleased with our turnaround time, and we're hoping to replicate this time frame for future intakes. We also want to mention that there were many strong submissions. However, FIT is a competitive grant and program, so we had to make some difficult decisions about who we would move forward. It's important to note that we had no sense of who or how many organizations would be applying for Intake 1 or what kinds of solutions we would receive. As such, we did not select organizations based on where they were located in Canada, where they were testing, and what types of organizations they represented. Instead, we focused on moving forward the ones with the most promising ideas. I'd like to acknowledge that we had a few organizations contact us for some individual feedback. We're not able to provide this for Intake 1, but we do appreciate hearing from you, and please know that this is definitely under consideration. If we can find a way to offer more individualized feedback on our decisions in future intakes, we will do so. So we'd now like to share some general feedback about some common areas for improvement in the concept notes. So you'll recall that there were 5 areas to address in the concept note, the first of which was the idea to test. In this section, among other things, we asked you to explain your idea and what makes it unique or different. So what we found in this section was that many of the submissions appeared to be proposing project implementation rather than explaining an idea to test. In addition, we found that many SMOs did not explain why their idea was innovative or how they were providing a new or an improved solution to a problem. Another aspect that was not always clear was that the impact on gender equality, directly or indirectly. Many concept notes presented a limited analysis from a gender perspective, making it more difficult to establish the link between an innovative solution and gender equality. And finally, some of the submissions failed to clearly demonstrate how local beneficiaries contributed to the design of the innovative solution, or how they will be consulted and involved through the testing process. In the section competitive analysis or context, we asked what problem or challenge that is it that you're trying to address, and what is the current practice, and whether you've done something like this before. So what we noticed here was that some of the applicants failed to demonstrate how their innovative idea is new or improves an existing approach, either locally or in other communities and countries. We also found that many applicants did not provide a clear explanation of the central question of how the idea would be tested. Most submissions were also lacking some detail about how they would generate and gather evidence. And another issue we saw was that SMOs did not always propose realistic objectives given the limited time frame for the testing provided. For the people expertise section, we really wanted to understand what kind of expertise your organization brings to the testing process, as well as both your background and your local partner's background in this area. So one area that could be improved in this section was providing enough information about the people who would be involved in the testing of the innovative solution, as well as any of their expertise and experience in the field. Another challenge was that SMOs lacking necessary expertise didn't really indicate how they would complement their team to successfully test the solution. So for example, potentially bringing on a gender expert or a testing consultant or someone who has expertise in monitoring and evaluation. Finally, for a successful testing process, it's crucial for an organization to have strong local partnerships and an understanding of best practices for working in the Global South. So we'd expect that by the time you applied for FIT funding, you've already been in discussion with your local partners about the innovative solution, and you're developing a plan to work closely with them throughout the testing process. In the financial section, we were really looking for a clear understanding of how you plan to use the funds to test your idea. One of the issues we saw was that some organizations didn't actually fall under the $2 million limit for overseas expenditure in development assistance, which is a key criteria of the program. And for a complete submission, we also require the most recent or previous year's financial statement and, of course, articles of incorporation, which some organizations did not provide. And finally, we did note that a number of organizations asked for the full $250,000 over a maximum 15-month testing period. We didn't see a lot of requests looking to do shorter-term testing. And when reviewing all the applications together and seeing this trend, we started to wonder if SMOs were planning to test an idea or if they were using the funding more so for project implementation. So this isn't to say that organizations might not need the full amount or the full time period for their testing, but in the context of the whole intake, it just raised some questions on our side. So we wanted to highlight 4 key areas that could be improved in the concept notes that we received. We noticed that many organizations didn't quite understand that FIT is designed to support organizations at the testing phase of their innovation and not for general implementation. So about 3/4 of submissions did not clearly articulate how they were testing an innovative solution. Second, about 2/3 of the submissions did not adequately explain what made their idea innovative. In addition, more than half did not show a clear understanding of the context of their work. So for example, it wasn't clear what made their approach different or better than current practice, or if there were if there was practice that was similar to that in other parts of the world. And finally, about half of the submissions did not show how their innovative solution would advance gender equality either directly or indirectly in this process. So the first intake was also an important learning experience for the FIT team. We recognize that some SMOs had challenges with our application process, the user account, or the submissions. We've taken this into consideration and will be moving to a new online system for intake 2. We're anticipating that this will make the submission process more straightforward for SMOs applying in future intakes. We will also be updating our concept note guidelines. We hope that this will help SMOs better illustrate what makes their innovation unique and how it will advance gender equality and empower women and girls. So we've also identified some tips to potentially help SMOs better prepare concept notes for future FIT intakes. The first is just, a general to ensure that you meet our eligibility criteria. Are you actually at the testing phase of your idea, or or have you started yet? Is your project innovative, and do you meet the definition of an SMO? Second would be to ensure that you have an idea to test and that you are addressing a locally driven need. Third is, just to carefully read the guidelines to ensure that you've clearly understood the expectations, and attend the webinar about the intake, which may provide complementary information that you won't get from just reviewing the guidelines. Review the FIT website for useful resources and examples of innovation, and sign up for program updates. Remember to do, a preliminary gender analysis, which identifies such things as the gender issue that you want to address, or how local cultural context may affect your testing, and whether your innovation may reinforce rather than reduce existing inequalities. 6, just seek out complementary expertise. Consult experts in the field to strengthen your application, and think about how you will fill gaps in your expertise. And finally, have someone who is not familiar with your work review your submission to make sure it's clear and understandable for someone who doesn't understand what you do or isn't familiar with your work. And so now we're going to answer some questions. And I think we've received some from the participants that we're hoping to address. So Rebecca, I'm not sure if you want to read that, and we'll see if I can answer them.
Sure. I'll just reiterate, I know that some of our support team in the background already answered this question, but just to make sure that everyone is aware of the answer to that one, the question was, will this PowerPoint be made available to participants later? And the answer is yes. We will send it out to all the participants who signed up for the webinar. So just wanted to make sure everyone saw or heard that response. We got a question, can we reapply?
That's a great question. So I think it's important for potential applicants to know that we're expecting to have 5 intakes. And so this was number 1 of 5. And the short answer is yes, organizations can certainly reapply. We wouldn't necessarily encourage you to resubmit the same idea unless you've made some significant changes to your concept note to better meet our criteria and expectations. Make sure that you've really got a clear idea to test, that you're effectively able to test it within a 15-month period or less, and that your idea meets our definition, of an innovative solution.
Thanks, Christina. Another question that we got was, can we receive individual assessment?
Yeah, and we addressed this in the webinar, and yes, we did receive a few questions from some organizations independently. The FIT program wasn't actually designed to provide individual feedback to SMOs about the quality of their submission. Instead, we designed this to provide feedback in a more general way, like we're doing today. But depending on the capacity of the program and the number of concept notes we receive in future intakes, we are going to consider this possibility moving forward. So we're certainly going to take a look at that seriously. We did get a few questions about that before today, and if there's something we can do and we can handle it, we'll try and do a better job next time.
So another question that we have is, for organizations that might think that they're not intending to apply again, is there any reason to stay connected?
Yeah, well, we think so. FIT isn't just a funding program for testing innovative solutions, but it's designed as a learning and a capacity building program. So if you're an organization who's working in the Global South, maybe interested in innovation and testing, we really think it would be worth your while to learn from the stories and the examples of those SMOs that are receiving funding, because we'll be sharing what they're doing throughout their process. And we think there'll be a lot of value add. And in addition, if you stay connected to us, we'll be letting you know about new resources we develop and as we post them online.
So that kind of ties into one of the questions that we got where someone asked if we could provide examples of those that were approved or who moved forward from the concept note stage to the proposal stage. So like Christina said, we'll have more stories as we move forward. And once our projects are funded early next year, we'll be sharing some of those stories and seeing some of the criteria that they were able to show in their concept notes. So we'll be sharing that with the SMO community.
Yeah, and I think if I can give you a sense of timeline for that, the ones that will be selected, we'll probably have our selections done by the end of this year, which means that organizations will start to go out into the field in the early part of 2020. And those, once all of that happens, we'll begin to share the projects, the testing, and all of the information around that.
So one of the questions that we have is your total budget pool. What is your total budget pool available for each intake? The person that asked the question also kept in mind, if we cannot answer for each intake, how much for the next maybe. So like it's been said in some of our previous webinars, we will be funding approximately 50 to 70 innovations over approximately 5 intakes. So it all depends on the quality of submissions received throughout each of the intakes. So it's not necessarily defined, but rather as a quality.
Yeah, and that's right. So we're going to see what kinds of the quality of intakes that we get for number one. We may have fewer or more projects to support. And it also depends on how much money is being requested and what we're providing in terms of funding for each of the proposals submitted.
So I see one of the questions about reapplying for the next intake. So we'll be announcing this towards the end of the month, and there'll be more details at that time. Like Christina mentioned, there'll be updated guidelines to our concept notes, as well as the deadlines for that will be announced towards the end of the month.
Yeah, and I think this might also be an opportunity to remind people, if you haven't signed up for our newsletters or emails, this would be a good time to do it. If you go to our the main page on our website, you'll see that there's a box at the bottom saying stay connected. In there you can put your name and I think your organization name and your email address. That's how you're going to learn about the next intake date and when the submission due dates are out. I think it's also important to know that the concept note guidelines are on the website, and yes, we will be updating them, revising them for the second intake, and I suspect we'll revise them at each intake level so that our program gets better. But you can start, and the crux of the information will be there in the second intake, so you can start at any time. And if you're not applying, if you don't plan on applying for intake 2, you can always apply for intake 3. So it's just something to keep in mind.
We're just taking a look at some of the other questions. Thank you all for providing your questions and your feedback.
Let's just see here.
So thank you all for your questions and your participation. It's always great to know that the audience is paying attention. So like Christina mentioned, the last slide that we have here is just our call to action. Like she said, there is value, or we see value in staying connected with us. So if you'd like to learn more about opportunities or future intakes, please ensure that you sign up to stay connected on our homepage and check the webinars and updates section on our website. This is the best way to receive program updates.
Oh, I noticed that there's one more question here that I didn't see before finishing. So the question is it possible to ask whether your submission was sent to the expert panel and passed the initial review? We hadn't planned on making that public, I'll be very honest. And just as we hadn't planned on providing individualized feedback at this point, I won't answer that today. I think we'll put some thought into that, and if it's something we can do, we'll let you know. But for today, unfortunately, we hadn't put much thought into that other than this question during the review today. So If this is something we can change or we decide to change, we'll let you know, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Christina. The last two aspects for staying connected, as per one of the questions, we will be announcing Intake 2 shortly and sharing information about our updated application process. So if you do stay connected either through our website and or through Twitter at fitfit_CA, we'll also be sharing innovators' stories as they get funded and start their testing process. We'll also be providing new resources for SMOs on our website in the coming weeks, including our first podcast episode with an SMO innovator, so stay tuned for that. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we'll be sending out a survey about the presentation shortly. So we'd ask that you please take 5 minutes to fill it out so that we can incorporate your feedback into our future presentations. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.